How's everyone this morning? All right. On behalf of the graduate school, I want to welcome you to our first program, graduate colloquium. I'm sorry. I want to welcome you to this program. This is our very first one we're offering, and I want to thank you for coming. And sometimes when you have an idea and you put it forward, and some of your colleagues thought it was a good idea, it's not a small thing, So we came up with this idea last year, and I bounced it around some people, some friends and colleagues, and they thought it was a good idea, and we started working on it, and assembled some very committed individuals like Dr. Osakwe and Dr. Kuck, and we formed a committee. And we've been on it for the past several months, since last fall. And here, this is where we are. So it's great to have individuals, faculty who believe and who are committed and who are supporting this program. And I thank you for supporting us and thinking that this is a worthwhile program. So on behalf of the graduate school, I want to thank you, and also on behalf of the committee. Who are the committee members here? Anybody? Committee members? By the way, Dr. Osakwe is the chair of the committee, and Dr. Kuck is the vice chair. Dr. Sumblin is a committee member. Who else? And I want to thank the committee for the great work they have done, and I think they have done a wonderful job putting this together. We've been meeting almost every other week for the past several months, and this is the product. So I thank you all for coming, and it's going to be a wonderful program. Again, I'm really appreciative for the faculty who saw the need to do this and who have supported and sent their abstracts and called and have shown great interest in this program. So I'm really, really gratified, and thank you for your support. And so again, welcome to the program. I'm going to have Dr. Porter, who is going to bring some greetings on behalf of Dr. Peters, who is not here today. Thank you.
Good morning. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Office of Academic Affairs, where our provost is Dr. Angela Peters. And we talked about this presentation a little bit, and she said, well, just tell them thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for everything you have done and everything you will do. And so right now, I will just give you her words. And she says, thank you, faculty, graduate school staff, and research colloquium committee for your unwavering support of our graduate programs and our graduate students. Today is an exciting day as we witness the impactful research that is being conducted by our students and our faculty members. Every one of the faculty members has left a lasting impression on their students. Please accept her appreciation for your hard work and passion that truly comes through as you inspire our students every day. Go Rams.
Thank you. And now it is my distinct honor to introduce the two presiding officers, Dr. Osakwe and Dr. Kuck. They're going to come forward and take over. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chair. We truly appreciate everyone that have put out time to submit an abstract. And you all know that scholarship and faculty are the key components of a university. And for you to have devoted time to write your abstract and to be here this morning despite the weather, it shows the commitment you have for students and for Albany State University. Very quickly, I would like to specify the modalities of the presentations. We have 15 minutes allotted for each presenter, and in the first 10 minutes, we hope that you get to the key points in your presentation and begin to round off within the last 5 minutes. And so once it's time, I will stand up and I'll start approaching you. So don't be scared. It's just to alert you that it's time to to give way for another presenter. Dr. Kuck is going to read the bio of each scholar. We value the scholarship that comes with graduate presentation. So we will read the bio so that everybody understands who the faculty is and what the faculty has been doing. So we devote time to doing that. And she will be the one to do that. So I will call out, and then she will read the bio, and then at the end of the presentation, we have the presentation in sections. So at the end of the first section, we will ask for questions. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, if you put it down, at the end of the section, we will take presentations. And of course, if a faculty is not here, we will skip the presentation and go on to the next one. Okay, so that's the modalities that we have. Does anybody have any questions? I'm hoping that this will come up. Okay, good. So the first presentation, Dr. Kuck is going to read out the bio of our first presenter, and by the way, we'll have to make sure that he's here.
Dr. Claudia Calder from the School of Education. Dr. Claudia Calder, originally from Kingston, Jamaica, holds a BA in psychology from Hampton University, a master's in clinical mental health counseling from Hampton, and a PhD in counselor education and supervision from Auburn University. She is an assistant professor in the School of Education and a licensed professional counselor. She has worked in different clinical settings, providing service to individuals with various mental health and behavioral diagnoses for the past 10 years. Her research interest includes multiculturalism, cultural competence development of counselor trainees, and minoritized students' sense of belonging to predominantly white institutions. Dr. Calder?
So what I will be talking about, if I can operate this thing to get it on full slide, is anti-racist mentorship in counselor education programs. And while these suggestions are for counselor education programs, I think it's something that can be adapted across disciplines. So in the recent years, with all the social unrest, I think it's adaptable across disciplines. So in the last couple of years, we know there's been some social unrest, some racist acts, if we want to be clear about what's been happening with the death of George Floyd and so on. So in counselor education, there's been this call for anti-racist everything. There's been conversation about cultural humility and so on and so forth. So when Dr. Ochie sent out the call, he talked about different things that we haven't presented as yet, and I was in the process of writing a book chapter, and this was a part of that chapter, and it was accepted, so I'm excited about that. So I'm just going to go through just the main requirements. So overall, this is just saying that in counselor education, it has been white. All the years that counseling and psychology has been around, and we know that BIPOC individuals in these programs often face some type of discrimination or oppression. So the presentation is really just talking about how we can become more inclusive in our programs. And I'm going to skip all of this. It's just talking about the fact that there are some additional requirements when it comes to mentorship that BIPOC students need. And one of the things that I suggested for anti-racist mentorship in counselor education programs is to develop anti-racist mentorship guidelines. And the first thing is really to develop formal mentorship programs. So within the discipline of counselor education, some programs have formal mentorship programs, others go about it informally. What the research in our discipline is showing is that the programs that have informal mentorship programs, their BIPOC students are not doing well. And that is because some of these students feel intimidated, excluded as if they don't belong to those programs. So it makes it really hard for them to reach out to faculty to ask for guidance. And what we're seeing in those programs is that these counselor educators don't have as much research published or as much opportunities as their white peers in those programs when it comes to going up for jobs. So to mitigate some of that and give them a chance to get different faculty position or roles when they graduate, I think it's important for our programs to develop anti-racist mentorship guidelines, which includes first developing formal mentorship programs. Provide meaningful representation. So cultural responsiveness is really the degree to which campus supports effectively responds to the need of culturally diverse students' population. So one of the other suggestions was to ensure that BIPOC students have access to diverse mentors. So in one of the running jokes, I guess, it's not really a joke, it's a fact, in counselor education is that cross-cultural mentorship or cross-cultural interaction is inevitable, right? We even talk about it in clinical practice, like BIPOC, there's this thing, research is showing that, clients benefit more when they have a counselor that look like them, a therapist that look like them, a psychologist that look like them. Great, but we know that's not going to be the case for a lot of BIPOC clients because we don't have that many BIPOC clinicians. It's just a fact. So increasing representation within our programs so that students can have access to mentors in different disciplines or individuals in the field is going to be important as well. Prioritize the recruitment of BIPOC faculty. This is written in every single standard that we have, yet every committee that I serve on, every organization that I am a member in, there's always some research, there's always discussion. Even the KCRP vital statistic, KCRP is our accrediting body, shows that we don't have enough BIPOC faculty. So it's written, it's everywhere, that we need to have it, but it's not happening. So again, I guess just beating that same horse of we need to prioritize recruiting BIPOC faculty for the simple fact that research is showing that these students can benefit from mentoring relationship with faculty that look like them. Talk about also creating networks of BIPOC mentors across campus and in professional organizations. So being intentional about basically coming up with a dispository or even a list of different faculty across the university that are open to being mentors to these students. Professional development opportunity focused on equitable mentorship. And in the book chapter, we went into like specific professional development opportunities, but I had to revamp, I guess I would say, the presentation because it's in press right now, so I'll give you all the abbreviated version. So we talk about the underrepresentation of BIPOC faculty and the inevitable that is inevitable for cross-cultural mentoring relationships to happen. So these programs have to be intentional about ensuring that they are presenting their mentors with equitable resources for their mentees. And that might even look like one of the things it's 2022, and one of the things that we're doing in our discipline right now is trying to develop a list of BIPOC scholars' work to integrate in different curriculum and syllabi. I'm like, it's 2022, we haven't been doing this before, so here we are with that. So ensuring that we have the work of BIPOC faculty and give presentations and professional development to our faculty. And then collect data on mentorship outcomes. And I guess this one was really personal for me Because when I went to Auburn, I am one of those students. I am open about asking for mentorship because I know that I don't know everything. So I saw a faculty member, I read her vita, I was like, yes, this is going to be my mentor. I went to her, and I didn't produce anything for like the first 2 years I was there. And I was looking at the vita like, you've done all of this, you're my mentor. There was no intentionality behind anything. So I ended up getting a mentor that was actually in the counseling psychology program. And that last year, because I finished my program in 3 years, I produced more than I did in the first 2 years with this faculty that's in my program with this long old vita. And what was behind it was that, one, intentionality, and two, she was just more productive with mentees in general. While the other, she basically had mentees, but they were doing her stuff. So I think it's important for us, for one, counselor education programs to collect the data about what mentorship outcomes look like for their different faculty. And in the book chapter, there's a table. It might be the faculty name. How many master's or doctoral students did they mentor? What were the outcomes for those students? And in our profession or our discipline, outcomes look like for doctoral students, did they get a tenure track job? If for the master's students, were they matched with a clinical practice? Did they pass the NCE? Are they a part of different professional organizations? What do those outcomes look like? And not only collect it, but then be transparent about it. Publish it in the handbook like you do everything else, right? Let the students know about these different faculties so they can be intentional about reaching out to them. Because if you have this formal mentorship program and you just blindly match students with faculty that you're like, oh, this might be a good match, but that faculty is not being intentional about giving students different opportunities that will then help them in the profession, then what's the point, right? So collect that data and be transparent about sharing that data with the students. And I think I did a good job on this one. But overall, that's just the basis of it. And it really will benefit current and prospective students. And it will benefit all counselor education students, not just BIPOC students. It will benefit all of them. But this is specifically so that BIPOC students can be included in the different benefits that we know that mentorship have for students in general when it comes to not only their academic success, but their career decisions. Because in our profession, we notice that no mentorship equals no research publications, equals students not even want to enter the profession because they don't have a good representation of what it looks like. So, thank you.
Thank you so much in giving us the detail, even though it was brief, but it was still detail on point, and we got all the gist about anti-racist mentorship in counseling. Cross-cultural diversity is needed. Increasing representation, we need to have that. And prioritizing recruitment of BIPOC faculty. So all the points you made, well taken, and we should actually think about this from all perspectives. Thank you. So we're going straight to the second presenter, and Dr. Kuck is going to read the bio. Thank you.
Dr. Kabi has extensive scientific knowledge and research expertise in microbial food safety and human health, evaluating and in processing microbial food safety and conducting validation studies for liquid and solid foods. He possesses excellent and unique expertise on utilizing high-pressure processing for food safety and microbiology. He participated in the development of protocols and procedures for identifying the microbial diseases. Dr. Kabi?
Good morning, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. This morning is really difficult for all of us. It's raining so hard. So I am Niyamul Kabir and I'm Assistant Professor of Biology in Natural Science Department. I joined last year. I'm fairly new. I'm trying to know all of the resources and other things here. So as in my bio, it was mentioned that I'm working on food safety microbiology. So I'm just going to talk about some of the work still I'm collaborating, and also I'm trying to do something here so that, that we can understand that what's the other process can be happening. So according to the CDC, we know that every year in the United States, almost 48 million people are getting infected with foodborne diseases, and almost 128,000 people are getting hospitalized. More than 3,000 people are actually, deaths is occurring because of the foodborne pathogens and their diseases. So that's why there is a Food Safety Modernization Act has been actually, it was legislated as a law in the year of 2011 during the President Barack Obama. He actually confirmed that made it a law as a Food Safety Modernization Act Food Safety Modernization Act to protect the food safety and also to control the foodborne pathogens and foodborne diseases. One of the important part in this Foodborne Modernization Act to control the water safety as well, because water is one of the important vehicle to transfer foodborne pathogens, especially in the agricultural commodities, because we are using lots of low agricultural commodities, and if we are not controlling those water safety, then it can increase lots of foodborne diseases. So that's why there was an incident happened in 1854 in London that there was a waterbed happened. Because of that, now epidemiology research is actually one of the most important concerns. So as you know that we have both public and private sector of water system, and nowadays this is one of the important concern is that because of the arising conditions of different foodborne pathogens presence in that water. So, and also we know that climate change is happening gradually, and this climate change is working as a threat to increase the foodborne pathogens in the water system. So, based on these, as agricultural water is considered one of the most important risk factor because it's using in the irrigation system and also in the raw agricultural products we are using it whenever it's going to the consumer, and also if you are producing ready-to-eat product as well. And it is mentioned in the Food Safety Modernization Act that you have to now act in a decent way that you can control produce safety rule to prevent the infections, to prevent the exposure of different microbial pathogens. So, according to the CDC, these are the few pathogens is really important to the United States, and you know that all of those foodborne pathogens, mostly 62% is bacterial agents. And then 29% is parasitic, 9% is viral agent. According to all of those different other bacterial pathogens, these three is one of the most important concern, that Salmonella, Listeria, Monocytosis, and E. coli. And there is a data actually surveillance that you can find out this information that is called National Outbreak Reporting System, and you can get all of those informations about these pathogenic incidents. So in our work, what we have done is that at first we are trying to see that how these pathogens are actually surviving into the water without any nutrient for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And then the second objective was that to find out that sometimes bacteria is depositing on the different surfaces. So without any nutrient, surface means plastic or any kind of stainless steel formations. So how long they can survive onto that surfaces as well? Because those things we are using regularly, and if we are not controlling it, it can create a problem, and it can spread those diseases into other areas, and also consumers can get infected, and also we have to make sure that we are controlling those. So in this work, we have utilized these 4 strains of Listeria monocytosis. We have collected this American type culture from ATCC. All of those are fairly the same type of isolates. Actually, it's called serovars. They have same type of morphological characteristics. They are having same type of infectious attitude. So we actually gathered these informations from the CDC, that what are those isolates or serovars have all of these pathogens. So 4 strains of Listeria, 5 strains of Salmonella, 6 strains of E. coli we have utilized. And also we have utilized, actually this work I am collaborating, I am working on some of those data sets. This is the first part. So we used the Cumberland River water. Actually it was water-flaved, and also it was cleaned a little bit to find out that we can reduce all of those other components present in the water, to see that how long those bacteria can survive without any food. And there is some protocol I have developed with this is one of the students, and also my postdoc supervisor was involved into that. So we have utilized those protocol to make those kind of bacterial inoculations into this work. So this is more or less a design of this experiment, that it was designed as a completely randomized block design, and it has 3 biological independent replications, 2 instrumental replications, and 2 microbiological replications. Actually, for this work we have done 4 replications, because there's something happened with 2, that we couldn't get the data set for the week 3rd and week 4th, because something happened, electricity was not there. So, but we used 2 complete biological replications from there. And this is the way that we did the statistical analysis. Mainly the data arrangement was done with Microsoft Excel, and then the pictochart infographic software, and then the main analysis was done by SAS 904. For this one, I didn't use OpenAPI, but we are using for other work as well. So mostly it was done this Tukey adjusted ANOVA and Garnet adjusted ANOVA. So as you know that temperature and humidity is really one of the important factors to grow bacterial colonies or bacterial populations. So though we are doing this into the controlled environment, but sometimes all of those temperature is fluctuating. So we are thinking like that this is a room temperature, but sometimes it's so hot, sometimes it's so cold, right? Because of those air circulations and all those air conditioner situations. So we actually monitored with this temperature, and as we actually decided to take these 5, 25 and 37 degrees Celsius. The 5 is something like whatever the refrigerator we have, whenever we are buying it, you can see that there is a range. It's not 4 degree always. And then 25 is mostly the room temperature, and 37 is our body temperature. So most of the foodborne pathogens, they are growing very well into this. So we actually took these temperature ranges, and we did up to 28 days, that means 4 weeks, and based on that we can have some ranges here. But one thing we can say that all of the ranges is something like plus minus 2.5 degrees centigrades, increases or decreases. And also the relative humidity is, the main statement is that is humidity is more than 60%, it will have the optimum bacterial growth. If it is decreasing less than 20%, then it's inhibiting the bacterial growth. So that was the another information that we want to look at, that how those two factors are actually working against that. So this graph is actually determining those informations here. Now from the main result is that, as I say, that we used only water and nothing there, and the temperature there. So from these we can see that this is the 5 degrees centigrade, and we use these 3 bacteria, Listeria, E. coli and Salmonella. You can see that from 0 to 28 days, all of them has growth. Only you can see this is Listeria monocytosis, that at 5 degrees centigrade, it has close to 1 log reduction, close to 1 log CFU. The log CFU, we actually have a protocol to count the bacterial colonies. So you can find out that how much bacteria is there. Based on that, you can figure it out that what kind of bacterial growth is going on. So we converted into log CFU, but in general, you can see that at 28 days at 5 degrees centigrade, that means the refrigeration is still, the bacteria is there. Listeria is a little bit less, but that E. coli and Salmonella is still having, comparing to the day 0, still is having 3 log growth. But look at this one, that at 25 degrees centigrade, all of them from 0 to 28, it has full growth. There is nothing, no food is there. Then 37 has the same result. So you can understand that without anything, bacteria can survive even 28 days. We are actually planning to have it more. Some of the students are doing it. That how long they can survive. But it looks like that it can survive with low environment for a long time, even in the refrigeration as well. Because we are thinking like if we are refrigerating, our food will be protected. But it's not. So, and also think about that Listeria is one of the important concerns, because now we have a baby formula is there, and we are getting some of the incident that they are infecting by that. So we are getting a little bit lazy, so that's why we are always trying to have some ready to eat, ready to have something. So that's why these actually concerning about that, okay, the Food Safety Modernization Act is really important, and you have to imply the produce safety rules, that means the preventive controls. The another part was that fate of biofilm. Now, what is biofilm? And that means that I think all of you see, or you are observing in your sink, isn't seeing that there is something that black color is actually producing if you are not cleaning up, right? Those are the depositions of microbial colonies. So it's something like those colonies are there and they are creating some sort of layer, and also their microbial growth is there. If you are not careful enough and not using any kind of treatment, then we are exposing everything with our food and other things as well. So in the biofilm, normally plastic and stainless steel is mostly available in the research-based work, but there are other surfaces can be utilized for these. So in our research work, we saw basically plastic and stainless steel, and both of the experiments from the previous one and this one, we used these inoculum levels. And also this time we reduced our temperature for just 25 and 37 because nobody is actually reducing that. So what we are observing is that we used wild type and we used pressure stressed bacterial colonies. So pressure stress, I want to say that pasteurization is one of the important part, and we're done. And pressure stress is another emerging technology that we can control our bacterial growth. So we have utilized this thing. But I'm just going to, this is the procedure that how we have utilized that. And also this one, I want to show you that this is actually that control system with that selected media. Still there is some over the detection limit bacterial colonies are there, and also this one is showing that another rubber cocoon that without selective media. And look at the stainless steel. They have more bacterial growth than rubber cocoon. So, and also though it is in selective media and non-selective media. So Overall, I can say the conclusion is that though we are not providing any kind of nutrients, the bacteria can survive in the low nutrient environment for a long time, and this is one kind of indication that we have to make sure that we are implying Food Safety Modernization Act produce safety rules, that means the preventive cares to control the foodborne diseases. Thank you. I'm sorry I took some time.
Food safety, that is so scary.
I thought our refrigerator was doing more for us.
That's right. I thought so. That is so scary. I'll have to get personal later with you. So what do we do to begin to work that, apart from the Food Safety Modernization Act and the need to have food safety rules? This is a wonderful investigation that tells a lot about our life, everyday life. So please, a round of applause once again for our wonderful presenter. Okay, so we're going to our next presenter. Dr. Kuck is going to introduce our next scholar.
Dr. Freeman Vincent completed a bachelor's degree in economic science from the Federal University in Brazil, as well as a bachelor's degree in Spanish education from Buffalo State College. She earned a master's and a PhD in Spanish literature from the University at Buffalo. She is currently an associate professor of Spanish literature at Albany State University. Dr. Primo's research focuses on Brazilian literature, culture, and civilization. Her research interests also include peninsular literature, Latin American literature, post-colonial theory, globalization, and women's studies.
Thank you all for the opportunity. As Dr. Osakwe said, we gotta hurry, so here we have the Brazilian economic development and the mestiçagem and the cortiço. It has nothing to do with economics. It has to do with literature. But even though I have a degree in economics, so I'm gonna give you a background here about the Brazil, because not all of us are familiar with that. So Brazil was a colony of Portugal until 1822. And in 1822, the 19th century, that's when we had the Brazilian literature. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about o cortiço. I put this PowerPoint here. It doesn't have a lot of information, but it has the name of the characters because Brazilian names and might sound funny. So the name of the novel is O Cortiço by Aloysio de Azevedo. And as I said, in the Naturalism in 1870. And here you have the picture of O Cortiço. O Cortiço is this little village here that is owned by a Portuguese character in the novel. And it seems it's the space where the action takes place. Okay, so it's very precarious conditions and a lot of people live there and sometimes they have to share space. Okay? And then during this time we had two discourses in Brazil. One believed that the blacks and mulattoes and the mestiçagem would make Brazil develop. And another one, which is the one that Aloysio Azevedo takes or participate, believed that the racial miscegenation would result in barbarism and degeneration instead of development. And then, as I said, the Brazilian naturalism, the synthesis of the positivism and the Darwinist epistemology, which started in Europe, and then this guy, Aloysio de Azevedo, introduced the sensuality and made this a Brazilian naturalism. Okay? And then here's my thesis. The thesis is using the psychoanalytic approach based on Freud and Frantz Fanon theories. This presentation will focus on the analogy between the countries of Brazil and Portugal, as well as the masculine and feminine characters. And then we have all of them here. So there is a couple here, Romão, the Portuguese Romão, the slave Bertoleza, and then the other Portuguese guy, and then the triangle, a love triangle here. Okay, so in O Cortiço, the relationship between Bertoleza and Romão reinforces the central theme of the improvement of Brazilian race during the period. Bertoleza was a slave, subject to numerous ways of exploitation and humiliation. She believed that Human was a man from a superior race. Despite of suffering and humiliation, she stayed in her, quote, dark condition of working animal, end quote. Bertoleza, as the narrator clearly states, was subservient to the dominance of the superior race which Human represented. She was satisfied being in the solitude of her daily labor. According to the narrator, she felt so inferior that she avoided any type of social interaction. Bertoleza was ashamed of herself, and for this reason, she would, quote, curse herself for being who she was. She thought she was a black stain on that bright and clear prosperity, end quote. At the same time, John Human, representing the Portuguese stereotype of superiority, is determined to become extremely rich. He does not surrender to the Brazilian environment, and after receiving an inheritance, Human increases this value even further by exploiting the Brazilian people, mainly the slave Bertoleza. When Human first meets Bertoleza, he tries to gain her confidence. However, he ultimately deceives her by keeping the money that she would give to him, money which should be used to buy her freedom, and then he forges a letter of freedom, gives to her, and tells her owner that she ran away. With the money, the money that he saved from her, he buys a land, and later he builds the cortiço. During this time, Human and Bertoleza become lovers, but this relationship is never made public. According to the narrator, it was very shameful for Human to have a relationship with a slave. However, Human maintains this relationship because of the benefit he could obtain from Bertoleza's hard work. Quote, as the narrator says, now living with Human, Bertoleza represented the roles of a cashier, housekeeper, and lover. Though she worked exceedingly hard, she always portrayed a happy face. At 4 o'clock in the morning, she was already working diligently, as she always did, making coffee for the clients and preparing lunch for the stone quarry workers who worked in the little market behind the place where she worked. She swept the house floor, sold items in the tavern when Human was busy outside. So in this quotation, clearly states that Bertoleza is continuously exploited and humiliated by Human. It seems that she also believed that Human was superior to her. Her inferiority complex allows her to accept inhuman conditions which she considered to be normal. Bertoleza has inculcated the, quote, the archetype of the lowest value represented by the Negro, end quote. She resigned herself to the dominance of the superior race and seems to be satisfied to be able just to breathe during the solitude of her daily labor. According to the narrator, Bertoleza's inner being was cowardly and submissive like her parents who raised her in captivity. She hid from everyone, even from the low-class people, because she was ashamed of herself. She cursed herself for being who she was. She was always sad and continuously thought of herself as if she were a dark spot, an indecorous stain in that bright and clear prosperity, end quote. As Frantz Fanon has explained in Black Skin, White Mask, the cortiço's narrator believed that Bertoleza has internalized racism in her own detriment. She was shaped by the Portuguese view of non-white people and as a result undertakes the European stereotype. After Bertoleza gains her freedom from her previous owner, she subjugates herself by accepting the role of the beast of burden, instead of fighting to be recognized by Human and the society as his companion and partner. She perceives herself as evil, ugly, immoral, dirty, and for these reasons hides in Human's shadow because she is not proud of being who she is. Bertoleza thinks she symbolizes a dark spot in Human's soul. The white people have inculcated in Bertoleza's mind that they are exactly the opposite of her. They, including Human, embody brightness, purity, beauty, and morality. In other words, white Europeans' principles have forced an existential deviance on her being. Bertoleza is, quote, a white man artifact, end quote. The narrator then states, through Miranda, Rumon's jealous Portuguese friend, that there is a clear parallel between the slave Bertoleza and Brazil. Both of them were subservient to men and to the colonized country, respectively. Miranda states, Brazil was, quote, a beast of burden loaded with richness to be controlled by the white man. And Bertoleza, quote, was a bad-mannered Brazilian with no virtue, end quote. In other words, Miranda believed that Brazil and Bertoleza, quote, were no more than working animals to be used by the superior race, end quote. However, Miranda's motivation to promote these ideas was his jealousy. In fact, Rumon takes advantage of Bertoleza in Brazil. He exploits the stone quarry in Brazil, Bertoleza, and other tenants who live in O Cortiço. This narrative clearly states the Darwinism where the strong element, the white male, defeat the weak one, the black female. And as the narrator says, Bertoleza is the one on the crooked stump, the same dirty, scattered-brained person as she was. She could not enjoy her rights that he had obtained by the virtue of his status. On the contrary, Rumon climbs socially. The unfortunate slave Bertoleza descends further in the social pyramid, being left behind as an old neg is behind when no longer needed to continue the trip, end quote. Rumon tries to climb not only economically but also socially. After using Bertoleza, he tries to leave her. He denounces her to the son of her former owner so he can marry Miranda's daughter. The police attempt to arrest Bertoleza, but she committed suicide, stabbing herself. Her suicide can be interpreted from two perspectives. First, from Bertoleza's point of view, her death may represent the destiny of the inferior race. Freedom for this race was an impossible dream. The solution, however, could be found in death, thus eliminate reproduction. In this way, Bertoleza would end her father's legacy by preventing the possibility of a child being born in captivity. Secondly, from the Darwinist point of view, the death of Bertoleza represents the predominance of whites over blacks, which would ultimately spur the development of Brazil. The point can be made that the characters Rumon and Bertoleza are connected respectively to Brazil and Portugal. Additionally, the idea of the colonial Manichaeism, which determined the superiority of Portugal over Brazil and the white class over blacks, is maintained. Thus, the domination by Portugal and Rumon over Brazil and Bertoleza is justified by the ideological project of bringing progress to the uncivilized country and its people. Even after the political independence of Brazil from Portugal and the legal liberty of Bertoleza from her previous owner, both elements still do not begin a phase of independence and prosperity, but rather a period of dependency and of the modern capitalist system. Unlike Rumon, Jerônimo does not resist to the tropical environment. Initially, Jerônimo, as well as other members of the superior race, is characterized as hard worker, reliable, and a strong Portuguese man who is good father and husband. He is a man of irreproachable character and honesty, as the narrator comments about Jerônimo. It was not only his zeal and ability that moved him forward, but two other factors contributed to his advancement. His strength, like the strength of a bull, which made his fellow workers respect him, and his sincere character, an austere purity of his values. He was very honest man who had very simple lifestyle, a lifestyle that was free from complexities. He simply goes from his house to work and back home, and as a result, he never had an extramarital relationship. At this point, Jerônimo's reality principle was still stronger than his pleasure principle. He was loyal to his Portuguese moral values and family traditions. As Freud states, there exists in the mind a strong tendency toward the pleasure principle, but that tendency is opposed by certain forces or circumstances so that the final outcome cannot always be in harmony with the tendency toward the pleasure, end quote. Nevertheless, Geronimo subconsciously represses his instinct associated with the pleasure principle, which disturbs the moral world of his ego. As a result, the pleasure principle, which is synonymous with happiness, makes Geronimo change. He succumbs to two forces in Brazil, the tropical environment and the women. One of these women is the mulata Rita Baiana. Geronimo's instinct overcomes his reality principle. Geronimo's desire for this woman is stronger than his Portuguese moral values. According to Freud, the pleasure principle is related to a person's desire. In this context, Geronimo's desire can be related to his feeling of happiness. The demand Geronimo has for happiness is a threat to the social customs, norms, and social values established by family traditions, church, educators, and other institutions of control. In conclusion, it can be stated that the parallel drawn in Cortiço between Brazil and its women as opposed to Portugal and its white male population highlights Azevedo's reliance upon scientific deterministic thesis and further illustrates the direction that leads to a pessimistic future for Brazil and its feminine population. Following the precept of European theories, Cortiço reinforces the idea that Brazil and its female population are fated to degeneration and to the inability to become fully civilized. The couple, Romão and Bertoleza and Geronimo Rita, represents a status quo of the old colonial order. Even though Brazil has gained its political independence from Portugal, the colonial economic ideal persists. The corruptive nature of Brazil and its women justify their subordination to the developed countries and to the national and international community. We didn't even see half of this, okay? But thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Primo. That's a wonderful story unveiling some of the things that are still going on today, the colonial implication on the colonized, dichotomist discourse in Brazil, and using characters, female characters, to unveil to us what is going on. So thank you so much, and once again, please, round of applause for her. And Dr. Kuck is going to read the bio of our next presenter.
Dr. Scott Mcdermott received his bachelor's degree from Cornell University and his master's and PhD degrees from St. Louis University. He is the author of Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Faithful Revolutionary, and of the Puritan Ecology of Mobility, Corporatism, the Politics of Place, and the Founding of New England Towns Before 1650, as well as numerous other articles and peer-reviewed publications. He is currently an associate professor of history at Albany State. Dr. Mcdermott?
Okay, go ahead.
All right, good morning, colleagues. I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way and just read it from my papers, so please bear with me. Puritan ecology, as it developed in New England, did not emphasize the conservation of nature for its own sake. Godly believers, as the Puritans called themselves, saw themselves as the crown of creation and as its stewards. As Sarah Irving has argued, to leave the land in its wilderness state would have meant, quote, that humanity had shirked its responsibilities toward the rest of the creation, end quote. Brian Donahue, in his very important book, The Great Meadow, says the New England Puritans practiced husbandry, which he defines as, quote, the careful balance and integration of diverse elements across a varied and difficult landscape, end quote. This integration was essential to the mixed farming regime imported from Old England, which hinged on the fertilization of arable fields with the dung of animals, who in turn required pasture and winter fodder in the form of hay. Thus, it was crucial that each inhabitant of a New England town have access to sufficient grazing and meadowlands, as well as woodland for fuel and fencing, in addition to arable. As Donahue puts it, quote, once established, these elements, plowland, orchard, meadow, pasture, and woodland, were for the most part conserved, end quote. But the conservation efforts of the godly were designed not to preserve nature in itself, but to guarantee the survival of each local community, which was conceived as an organic and living covenanted body. Land distribution in New England towns was meant both to promote conservation and as a ritual for generating a fully articulated social body in which each member of the body received land in proportion to their status and perceived value within the community. This type of ecological practice may not meet the criteria of academic ecologists, but I believe it falls within the purview of ecological history, as defined by William Cronon in his landmark work Changes in the Land. A history that is dialectical in that, quote, environment may initially shape the range of choices available to a people at a given moment, but then culture reshapes environment in responding to those choices. The reshaped environment presents a new set of possibilities for cultural reproduction, thus setting up a new cycle of determination, end quote. Cronon suggested that the difference between Native American views of property and those of European settlers had been exaggerated. Most Indian groups held land collectively. Individual rights in land were analogous to what Europeans called usufruct, which meant the right to use the land, not to own it, with personal ownership confined to the products of the soil or the things fashioned from them. However, English law also recognized many different types of land tenure that bore little resemblance to freehold ownership. And New England towns featured extensive commons owned by the inhabitants collectively. But Cronon argued that the settlers over time increasingly commodified the land, creating an abstract and absolute right of property in land divorced from communal patterns of land use. He offered colonial Ipswich, Massachusetts, as a pioneer in this transition, basing this assertion primarily on David Grayson Allen's book, In English Ways. Allen had claimed that most early Ipswich settlers migrated from the English counties of Suffolk and Essex, where the enclosure of land was reputedly far advanced, and as a result they avoided open field farming, neglected common rights, and set up a, quote, active and thriving market in land, end quote. And I don't have time to talk fully about English land use systems, but I need to sketch them out a little bit. In England, in the early modern period, their farms bore very little resemblance to what we think of as a farm. We think of a farm as maybe 50 or 100 acres with a fence around it. And in Stuart, England, in many places, they were still practicing what was called open field farming. So there would be common planting fields, and within that field, each farmer would have multiple strips that would be scattered out in different places, and those strips would be open. He would also, or she would also have rights in commons, common areas, common meadows, common woodlands, and so forth. So it was very scattered and discontinuous. In some parts of England, however, landlords were enclosing the commons, consolidating strips, and eliminating common rights. But other areas maintained the open field system, whose genius was the provision of dung to maintain fertility. When fields lay fallow as part of crop rotation, animals were allowed to graze and deposit manure, restoring fertility. For this reason, farmers were not allowed to enclose their strips, and in England, when they enclosed something, they used a hedge, not a fence, a thick hedge, because that would have deprived other inhabitants of their common grazing rights. David Grayson Allen presented the theory of geographical determinism, that many New England communities adopted open field or enclosed land use patterns based on which system prevailed where the settlers came from in England, and this is still widely accepted. But a closer look at the land and town records of Ipswich casts doubt on the validity of this hypothesis, and by extension, Cronon's analysis of commodification, at least during the first 50 years of settlement. For Ipswich was not largely enclosed. It practiced open field farming, but also permitted enclosure. However, the town also repeatedly set roadblocks to slow down enclosure and jealously defended common rights on the town's ample commons. The evidence suggests that the Ipswich settlers did not base their land use decisions on nostalgia for their counties of origin. Rather, they thought such questions fell within the domain of practical reason, and they created a hybrid of land use patterns with the goal of fostering a stable, well-proportioned, and sustainable social body. And I've been so long-winded up to now, I can't give you the Ipswich records and what's in there in great detail, but if you're interested, I can send you the chapter, the relevant chapter from my new book. Just email me, scott.mcdermott@asurams.edu. In the book, first, I examined Allen's contention that most early Ipswich settlers came from old enclosed regions of Suffolk and Essex in England. Focusing on the 14 men who were present at the founding of Ipswich in 1633 and in a position to influence the town's land distribution policies, I found that few definitely came from Suffolk and Essex, and only one was raised in a largely enclosed setting, namely John Winthrop Jr. Granted, the younger Winthrop was the main founder of Ipswich, but he actually spent little time there. In 1634, he was on his way to England to take up his new position organizing the Saybrook colony in what is now Connecticut, after which Winthrop showed little interest in Ipswich. Turning to the actual configuration of fields and farms in Ipswich, beginning with the first recorded land distribution in 1634, I discovered that most early settlers were assigned arable land in two common fields, one north and one south of the town. Individual plots were generally larger and more contiguous than strips in a typical English open field, although some were small and narrow enough to be described as strips. Settlers also received allotments of meadow and woodland. And beyond the common fields, larger tracts of land were distributed to the more prosperous inhabitants. These were indeed farms of the sort that one might find in an enclosed landscape, but there is no evidence that these farms were actually enclosed with fences. In fact, there was little need to do so. The point of physical enclosure was to keep animals in or out of one's land, but in Ipswich, the common herds and flocks were largely kept on necks of land, peninsulas that could easily be fenced off. West of town, however, there was a great cow pasture, or cow commons, where working cattle that had to stay closer to the house lots were kept. So dairy cows and some oxen. In addition to grazing rights on these commons, the early settlers also received allotments of common meadow and woodland. This arrangement is strongly reminiscent of the anonymous, undated essay on the ordering of towns, which circulated in early Massachusetts. This document suggested that towns be laid out in concentric circles, with the inner compass divided into house lots, while farms would be located in the outer circumference. The essay proposes the creation of common fields for the time being, with the expectation that eventually enclosed farms would become the norm. In any case, the Ipswich founders, like the author of the essay, were not committed to either the open field or the enclosed model because of geographic determinism. Their approach was more flexible and pragmatic within the parameters of their beliefs about community. According to the Aristotelian notion of distributive justice, which informed their corporatist image of each community as a living social body, the more exalted members of the body deserved greater emoluments and privileges. Thus, it seemed fitting to distribute larger farms of the enclosed type to leading citizens, while bestowing smaller and more fragmented holdings on the community's lesser members. Another practical reason to create open fields at the outset of settlement was the expectation that people might need to graze their animals on arable land after the harvest. This was the right of shack, as it was called in England. The town records reveal a desire to keep this possibility open, even though shack proved to be impractical in the colonial setting for a number of reasons, especially the harshness of the New England winters. On January 13th, in 1640 New Style, the town did pass an intriguing ordinance which provided that if the majority of landholders in each common field agreed that individual plots should be fenced, then all the landholders would have to follow suit. However, the fencing of all the particular plots and common fields never happened in Ipswich. The main reason for this was also quite practical. It was the desire to conserve wood resources. This may seem strange, given that North America in the 17th century must have appeared to an English emigrant to have almost unlimited forest. But the English consciousness of wood as a scarce resource died hard. One reason for this was that settlers tended to locate towns and plant crops on land that had already been partially deforested thanks to the Indian use of burning for forestry management. Early narratives described the coastal areas of Essex County, Massachusetts, as one such place. Timber regulations crop up in the early Ipswich records with obsessive regularity, and two ordinances of 1649 specifically prohibited fencing plots in the open fields. Here we see how environmental realities, not geographically determined predilections, shaped settlers' ecological decision-making. Another interesting feint toward enclosure took place in February 1645, New Style, when the town authorized the distribution of 3,244 acres of the Great Cow Common to individual, quote, inhabitants to be improved, end quote. However, this proposed distribution is not referenced again in the records until 1651, when the town meeting specifically forbade all improvements on the Cow Common. Another vote of around the same time deals with, quote, small parcels of land enclosed by proprieties, end quote, on the Cow Common, authorizing a committee to sell or let these, provided the said parcels of land exceed not one parcel. So what happened was the town meeting originally authorized enclosure of part of the Cow Common, but then they seem to have backtracked. In the meantime, some people who owned rights in the common rights, did enclose some lands, okay, on the basis of that first decision, but by 1651, the town no longer wanted to do that. They wanted to maintain common rights. So they allowed those enclosures to remain, but they forbade any further enclosure, okay. Something similar happened in 1660 New Style, when several landowners were allowed to lease and enclose 3 acres of common meadowland apiece, provided that they sowed, quote, good English hay, end quote. However, when some lessees enclosed more land than they were entitled to, the selectmen, that was like the city council, evicted them and ordered that they, quote, remove their fence, end quote. A chastened town meeting in 1664 New Style voted that the selectmen shall not have any further liberty to let out any more of common for years to plant. This represents another victory for the town meeting and common rights over the so-called lively land market, in Gloria L. Main's phrase, in colonial New England. And I certainly don't have time to list the many other examples of how the Ipswich town meeting and selectmen defended the common rights, protected the commons from individual encroachment, and were still setting aside new commons as late as 1668. But I do want to mention 3 significant entries from the 5th decade of Ipswich settlement. The first, found in the Selectmen's records of May 1676, represents the very first appearance of the word enclosure in the Ipswich records. Quote, all horses that shall trespass upon enclosures or common field or any neat cattle, swine, and sheep being taken in any common field or enclosure shall be liable, end quote. I'm almost done. Fittingly, even as this provision confirmed the existence of enclosures and the rights of their owners, it also protected common rights. A year later, however, the selectmen took steps to prevent unlawful enclosures which damaged the commons. Quote, whereas there are several persons that intrude upon the common by making several yards or pens which afterwards are made use of for gardens and planting, end quote, the selectmen decreed a significant fine of 5 shillings per week for every rod of ground so taken in or engrossed. Finally, in April 1682, the selectmen posed a question to the town meeting, asking, quote, whether any common or inhabitant may take up and enclose land upon the common or highways, as he or they shall see good for tobacco yards or other uses, end quote. Not surprisingly, the town voted in the negative. Okay, So you see, the vision was of a sustainable community with enough resources to nourish all the inhabitants for generations to come. And part of the book, too, just to close, this idea of the town as a living organic social body, for the Puritans, in their mind, this body of the town was analogous to the body of Christ. And I argue that for them, then, these towns had not only a basis in community, but a metaphysical basis as well. Thank you.
Dr. Scott Mcdermott, that was very revealing. You know, at times we see fences, but we don't even know the stories behind it and the implications. And thank you so much for giving us that detail. If you have questions, please write down your questions at the end of this session. We can take questions. I have a question for Dr. Kabi on food safety, and you share the implications of your findings, the fact that the bacteria survives even in very cold conditions. Do you have any recommendation for the ordinary person? Despite the Food Safety Rule Act, we don't even know that it exists. But do you have any direct recommendation to us? Because each time I put something in the freezer, I'm thinking I'm killing all the bacteria. But I'm getting a new dimension that is scary. Yeah. So what advice do you have for us?
Thank you for the question. Actually, it's something like normally the way we are using, before COVID-19, actually people are not thinking about all of those different preventive care informations. So even with those findings is showing that with low environment bacteria can survive, the main recommendation is that always we have to be more careful, and also there is some information available from FDA and USDA website we can find that even some dairy products, some other products, they have in fact the fact level is there too. That how we want to process the foods and what kind of temperature is needed. And also the date is also there as well. And normally another information is that whenever we are using ready-to-eat product, is sometimes we have to be more careful that you are using proper heat or not. That's the normal prevention care, but don't worry about it because this is the common life of us. But the thing is that people are now more scared about COVID-19, but we have to think about this, that all of those other bacteria is with us for through our whole life. And also it's changing all this. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
Saha. Dr. Saha is a professor of physics engineering in the Department of Math, Computer Science, and Physics. His research interest includes microwave characterization of artificial materials and exploring its applications in microwave devices. At present, Dr. Saha and his group is involved in designing an engineered material that will suppress 5G radiations from cell phone towers to ensure safe takeoff and landing of airplanes and protect human body from high-frequency, harmful electromagnetic radiation. Is Mr. Pendleton?
Yeah, my student.
Mr. Pendleton Walker is a pre-engineering student in the Department of Math, Computer Science, and Physics. His research interest is 3D simulation of electromagnetic waves.
Good morning, everyone. So this is my talk today, impedance control of microwave absorber with air gap. So let me explain what is microwave absorber is. So microwave absorber basically makes one metal. You see the metal layer in the yellow. To make this metal layer undetectable by airplane or any microwave signal. So what to do to make this metal plane undetectable? I have to put some material, plastic type material in front of that so that it can absorb complete signal and no signal will reflect it back to the radar. So now, is there any material can be used to make this metal plane undetectable? Of course not. This material has to have some specific property and thickness that we have to put in front of the metal structure. So in the market, we may get some material with specific thickness and specific property, but that material may not satisfy the demand of mine that I need to absorb that microwave signal with this material. So what I have to do? Then I have the only option to order this material from the company, and then company will charge lots of money because it is specific material, and company prepare or synthesis material according to their design or manufacturing process. So, but if I can do engineer in the lab, that means doing some metal patches on this material, then I can change the property of that material and I can make it happen here. So that is my research here. So what I am doing here, I am trying to make this yellow metal plate undetectable. So that is actually what I talked about. It is a certain company that give you this material data, and according to this data, I can use or I can make undetectable maybe at 9.1 gigahertz, the yellow or the blue, the green one, or the red one. You see, those are discrete number. So what happened in between? I don't have any material in the market, but I can make any available material in an engineered fashion that I can achieve that undetectable operation at any frequency. That is the beauty of this research. So what we have done here, we put some gap between the material and the metal plate. So that is actually the operation of absorber, how it operates. Let me explain a little bit. So signal comes, if there is a red. Oh yes. So that is a material and that is a metal plate, right? So when microwave signal comes, of course, impedance matching has to occur between air and the material. So then complete signal penetrate into the material, and then as signal proceed, its power is going down because there is some loss in the material. And when it touches the metal plate, it bounces back. And again, its amplitude or strength is getting decreased, and finally, nothing comes out as a return. That is the principle of microwave absorber, that if no signal returns, that means radar cannot see anything. That was happening in the B-52 US airplane, that is the radar cannot catch the airplane. It is exactly the same technique. So they put some material layer in front of the airplane, and it becomes undetectable by the radar. So anyway, so all right, so that is the operating principle of, and you see the material property and the length. These three things is the key factor. The thickness of the material and the material property, you see, there is an electrical property, there is magnetic property. These three things is the key factor. And I may not get all these three factor in one material. Of course not. I can get Department of Defense has lots of money, they can make it, but in our end, we don't have that much money, or our wallet is not that thick. So what we do, so I skip those equations, I just go to here. So what we have done here, first we characterize the material that is available in the market. So that is one material, and that is a metal plane, right? Okay. So if we have one sheet of this kind of material, then I see it can absorb. So that is one sheet. So that is one sheet of material here, say 1 millimeter, and it can absorb around 16.74 gigahertz, right? And if I use 2 layers side by side, then it will be 2 millimeter, and it will absorb around 8.36 gigahertz, right? But if I need 10 gigahertz, what to do? 10 gigahertz is here, right? 10 gigahertz is here. So what I have to do, I have to use one sheet of material and put some gap between this material and metal. So gap will shift this graph towards the 10. So how much gap is necessary? How much gap is necessary? So that is done by my student in the simulation. He was here, Mr. Pendleton Walker, he left. So look, here is the simulation. We put one air gap, just air gap. And that is the absorbing material that we got from the market. And that is my metal structure that we want to make it undetectable. And when we do the simulation, that is the simulation, we carry it out. Now look at here. So what is that? If it is 1 millimeter gap, you see the gap here? Gap, right? If it is 1 millimeter gap, I see how much? 8.5 or 6, and it is 0.75 millimeter gap, right? So it is 10 gigahertz that we want, that we need, right? And when it is 0.5 millimeter gap, then it is more than 10. That, okay, let us choose then this red one. That is 0.75 millimeter gap. So we determine the gap now that will work for 10 gigahertz absorption. So then, by simulation we got, then comes numerical validation. Is it really numerically justified? Let's do some math. And here is the mathematics here. So, any questions? Okay, no problem. All right. So now do some mathematics, and this is pretty much very common in the microwave engineering textbook. So nothing new here. So we found input impedance at this level, just looking at the air gap. And when it is here, then we again find the input impedance. Finally is this. That is the input impedance. And when you plug in all the numbers, and you see the air gap, L means length, right? L means length. LA means length of air gap, right? Length of air gap, 0.75 that we got from the previous slide. And when you plot this in a MATLAB programming language, look at here. So at around 10 gigahertz, look, it is very close to free space impedance, right? This point is very close. That means this is the base point, 10 gigahertz, that will be completely absorbed. So that means at 10 gigahertz, that metal plane will be undetectable. That's it.
What's the implication?
Yeah, implication like, say, of course, say, if it is undetectable, then I can save this device from 5G or any unwanted or harmful electromagnetic signal. So I don't need to make undetectable, but I want to make it interference less. So like airplane cockpit. If you ride in a plane recently, you see because of the 5G, airplane landing becomes ridiculous. I saw some news. So like Operation Theater, so unwanted 5G signal. It is a new effect now, 5G. So I want to make interference reduced. So okay, make some material and cover it. It will be fine. And good thing is that it will absorb only 5G, but other signal will come, no problem. And I can make it customized. Okay, I don't need that signal. Okay, block it. Yeah. So this is all about engineering. So you can design what you want to do.
That is so good. Thank you so much for making it real to us, because looking at the maths, some of us can get dizzy, but you went to the point, explained it, and we got the implication of why is it necessary to do that. Thank you so much.
We have two presenters. I think one will be with us today. Dr. Luwanga is an assistant professor of criminal justice at Albany State University. He's been a fellow on human trafficking and forced labor with the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights at Harvard. He is also an adjunct professor of law at Emory Law, where he teaches the Child Protection and International Human Rights course and the Advanced International Negotiation Seminar since 2017. Dr. Luwanga has previously consulted with the Carter Center on questions relating to human rights, human trafficking, conflict resolution, and democracy in Africa. He has extensively published on issues of child labor, human trafficking, human rights, and international law. There are a significant amount of details to that in the program. Dr. Ibe is a professor of criminal justice and the chair of the department at Albany State. Prior to joining Albany State University as an associate professor, Dr. Ibe was a criminal justice professor and chair of the criminal justice department at Voorhees College, Denmark, South Carolina. Dr. Ibe authored many articles in peer-reviewed journals and made several presentations on criminal justice issues in numerous academic conferences, including the American Society of Criminology, the American Criminal Justice Society, and the Criminal Justice Association of Georgia, where he also serves in the advising board. He recently co-authored 2 articles published in the Georgia Journal of International Law and Comparative Law and the ASU Criminal Justice Journal. He co-authored a book, Community Policing in Nigeria, Rationale, Principles, and Practice. Dr. Ibe currently serves as a reviewer in the African Criminology and Justice Journal. He holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Southern University in New Orleans, a master's degree in criminal justice from Clark Atlanta, and a doctorate degree in political science from Clark Atlanta.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Yeah, this article came about due to some arguments we normally have in my office every morning when we come to work. And then we tried and published this article with Georgia Journal of International Law and Comparative Law. Let's talk about real life. Every state in the United States have laws authorizing judicial waiver or transfer of child offenders to adult criminal courts for prosecution. There have been a lot of argument about the effectiveness of this judicial waiver as a tool against violent crimes committed by children in the United States. I teach juvenile delinquency, and Dr. Luwanga, who is not here, teaches some of our law classes, and this is a combination of our two classes. Our presentation seeks to answer a series of questions regarding judicial waiver. One, is the practice compliant with the U.S. constitutional standard? Is it a lawful practice under international instrument protecting children's rights? Is it really an effective tool against youth recidivism and juvenile violent crimes? Did we get that plan? Okay, our plan is we'll look at the overview of the concept of judicial waiver, the analysis of the constitutionality of the transfer laws in the U.S., and then the legality of judicial waiver under international law. Look at child offenders' rights to be tried by juvenile courts, because this is the main argument. Before I started this presentation, Dr. Osu has even started to question me about this idea of juveniles committing violent crimes, whether they are not supposed to be tried in adult court. We see the implications and what comes out of it. And then we look at the effectiveness of the judicial waiver practice and see if we have done this, what is the outcome, what have we succeeded in doing. We look at the overview of the concept of judicial waiver. In the 1970s and the 80s, there was a terrible rise and the rate of juvenile violence in the U.S. And what we saw is that most states adopted a get-off approach as a response against juvenile delinquency. And what we're going to ask ourselves, did it pay up, or was it a waste of time? Consisting of implementing the practice of judicial waiver, and then a procedure in which child offenders are transferred from the juvenile court to adult criminal court for prosecution and sentencing. Today, all states within the U.S. have judicial waiver laws. And mind you, every state in the United States have a different law as far as juvenile justice is concerned. Each state has a different law concerning juvenile justice. So we look at the concept of judicial waiver. Who is a child? Who is a child concerned by judicial waiver? Each U.S. state determines who is qualified for the status of a child under its criminal justice system. Once a person is considered as an adult by the state court or law, he or she is no longer acknowledged as a child, regardless of his or her age. This is one of the problems we have with the judicial waiver. And we'll come to that as we go on. In some U.S. states, the upper age of juvenile court jurisdiction over juvenile offenses is 17 years old. In other states, the common law says the minimum age for criminal responsibility at 7 years old. This came out of English jurisprudence. But many states specify the lower age of delinquency ranging from age 7 to age 14. This is a key clause, but some of them are still in practice. Overview of the concept of judicial waiver. Who is a child? The international standard protecting children defines a child as any person below 18 years of age. Article 1 of Convention of the Right of the Child of 1989 says that a child means every human being below the age of 18 years. Protection of the Convention of the Right of the Child are extended to every human being below the age of 18 years. What are the characteristics of judicial waiver? We look at age of transfer. It is not identical across all U.S. states. Like I said before, every state in U.S. have different juvenile law. In most states, the age of transfer is 14 and older. For example, Kansas. In Georgia, a child offender of any age who commit any crime, punishable by death or life imprisonment without parole, can be tried as adults. See Code of Georgia, section 11.5. Characteristics of a judicial waiver continued. There are two types of crime, Any criminal offense committed by a child of 14 or 15, e.g. in Alabama, California, Tennessee, and Georgia. Murder and capital crimes, certain violence felonies like non-negligent manslaughter. These are what we call Part 1 offenses. Robbery, aggravated assault, property crimes, burglary, larceny theft, motor vehicle theft. And then certain drug offenses are also included. And certain crimes committed by juveniles with prior records. That's where we start to have problems. Commonly, over 90% of juvenile transfers involve felonies rather than misdemeanors, e.g. in Arizona, Florida, and California. We look at the category of transfer of juvenile laws in the U.S. It can be categorized into 4 groups. Statutory exclusion or automatic transfer laws. Some offenses, e.g. murder, drug trafficking, weapons offenses, other felonies committed by children, say 16, 17 years, are automatically excluded from the jurisdiction of the juvenile courts. We have judicial discretionary laws or judicially controlled transfers. These are juvenile courts decide if the child offenders must be sent to adult criminal courts after the prosecutors filing of the transfer motion, e.g. in Maine, Missouri, North Carolina, North Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas. And then 3, prosecutorial discretion or concurrent jurisdiction laws. The prosecutor has the option of filing the charges against child offenders either before the juvenile court or the adult criminal court, because the prosecutor has the right to do that. And once an adult, always an adult policies. This is where they get some of our children, they make them become adult. If once you have been tried, or once your case have been moved to adult court, any other crime you commit, you'll be tried as an adult. This is a very big issue. We look at the constitutionality of a judicial waiver in the U.S. We look at some of the cases, Kent versus United States. The case concerned the 16-year-old Maurice Kent who resided in the District of Columbia and was detained and charged for burglary, robbery, and rape. Under the law, he was subject to the exclusive jurisdiction of the DC Juvenile Court, unless it waives its jurisdiction. Kent's counsel filed a motion in the DC Juvenile Court for a hearing on the question of waiver and for access to the Juvenile Court Social Service file that had been accumulated on Kent during his probation for a period of offense. But the Juvenile Court did not rule on these motions and transferred Kent to the DC District Court to be tried as an adult. Was the Juvenile Court waiver of jurisdiction valid? Holding. The U.S. Supreme Court held that the judicial waiver was invalid because the Juvenile Court failed to comply with the constitutional principles of due process, which is contained in the 14th Amendment. The Juvenile Court should hold a waiver hearing to determine whether Kent's case should be retained or transferred to adult criminal court. They did not hold that hearing. That makes it unconstitutional. Instead, the criteria to be made to ascertain the constitutionality of a judicial waiver's process. Criteria for constitutionality of judicial waiver. One, we have to look at the seriousness of a criminal offense to the community. If the criminal offense was committed in an aggressive, violent, premeditated, or willful manner. If the alleged offense was committed against persons or against property. The prosecutive merit of the complaint, sophistication of and the maturity of the child offender, record and previous history of delinquency, prospect for adequate protection of the public, and the likelihood of reasonable rehabilitation. This is one area that they look at before a child can be transferred to an adult court. Do we have any prospect for likelihood of rehabilitation? And we look at another case, Breed versus Jones. The 17-year-old Gary Jones was adjudicated by a juvenile court in California in 1971 for committing an act, if committed by an adult, will constitute the crime of robbery in violation of California Penal Code. After a hearing at the juvenile court, the court determined that Jones should be tried as an adult in California Supreme Court. Jones filed a writ of habeas corpus and argued that the adult criminal trial putting him, it was a double jeopardy in violation of his right under the 5th and 14th Amendment. Jones' writ was successfully denied by the Superior Court. The Court of Appeal, the California Supreme Court, Jones was tried as an adult and found guilty of first degree. Look at holdings. Issue, did a trial in adult criminal court after a trial in juvenile court for the same offense violate double jeopardy clause? The double jeopardy clause is found in the 5th Amendment. Holding, yes, the prosecution of a respondent in Superior Court after an adjudicatory proceeding in juvenile court violated the double jeopardy clause of the 5th Amendment as applied to the states through the 14th Amendment. Observation on the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Kent and Jones cases. We're doing a comparison on those two cases. In both cases, the U.S. Supreme Court only ruled on the unconstitutionality of procedures applicable during judicial waiver, rather than on the constitutionality of the practice of the judicial waiver itself. The prohibition of double jeopardy in Jones' case, establishment of conditions for the constitutionality of the judicial waivers process. Yes, the U.S. Supreme Court did not clarify if those conditions must be cumulatively met before the judicial court could waive their jurisdiction. In focusing only on the procedure of judicial waiver, the U.S. Supreme Court implicitly recognized the constitutionality of such a practice if the pre-established conditions are followed. And then we look at the legality of a judicial waiver under international law. Children's right to juvenile justice. Every child, according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, every child alleged as or accused of having infringed the general penal law has at least the following guarantees: to have the matter determined without delay by a competent authority or judicial body in a fair hearing according to law. Then Article 14 of the International Criminal Court said that everyone shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent tribunal established by law. Okay, let's look at the legality of judicial waiver under this and then. One's right to have this, then, and then let me look at the juvenile justice. You have two objectives, because that's one of the reasons why we come up with this article. Promoting the well-being of the child offenders by emphasizing their rehabilitation rather than seeking merely punitive sanctions. Implementing the principle of proportionality. The response to the Child Offenders Act must not only consider the seriousness of the offense, but also the individual circumstances of the offender. This is very important. But the conservatives are saying that this is too liberal an act for us to do this, because there are so many circumstances that make children do what they do. Some of them come from disorganized neighborhood and all that. So, in conclusion, judicial waiver is an ineffective practice. Its deterrent virtue against youth recidivism and juvenile violent crimes is unproven. Recidivism rates are lower for child offenders tried in juvenile court than for those who are tried at the adult criminal court. I'm sorry I couldn't get into all this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ide. A round of applause. We want to observe the presence of our president, Dr. Marion Ross Frederick. She's here with us, and perhaps we give her a round of applause. We appreciate her recognition of scholarship and what we do, and we want to give her a few minutes to maybe say thank you to all of you. Dr. Frederick.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know what, thank you for that, Dr. Osakwe. You know what, I wanted to say thank you all for being able to re-engage and bring forward your graduate research. I think as we start talking about how we become more research focused, I know we already are, but there's a lot of work that we still have to do. And as we're getting to that and you all are engaging with that, sessions like this are so important because it actually shows our students as well how important the research is. And as I'm talking to some of you, and I get the opportunity to do that one-off with several of you, I love to hear the research ideas that you have and the information that you're bringing forward. Our graduate school, Dr. Ochie, thank you. We're going to continue to try and get that expanded. And I think the way we continue to do that is get our students, just getting them to understand how important these degrees are. And I wish all the students were in this same room so they could hear what you all are talking about, because I think it makes a difference. It makes a difference in how they look forward to our graduate programs. And so as we're continuing to grow that and trying to really put that rigor, keep that rigor in our graduate programs and expand them, things like this it's important. I do want to be able to stay for a while and hear some of the other presentations. Dr. Nwafu, you always on top of it, so I'm glad I at least got to hear that part of it, but I will be here for a while. And if y'all have questions for me, let me know. But please continue to do this and continue to bring the other ideas of research and how we can bring that just more relevant to our students. And I don't want to sit down before I just remind everyone, you know, we are still coming through COVID-19, and our students have had a pause, and that's why I mentioned that. They've had somewhat of a pause, although they've been in the classroom. They may not have had the rigor that they normally would have had coming out of high school into our institution, and we've had to actually pivot and do some things very differently over the last couple of years. So to the extent that you can keep pushing our research, our graduate programs, all of our programs, please continue to do it, and let me know how I can help. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Ochie. I really appreciate it, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick. Please, another round of applause for her. We truly appreciate her presence because it's a lot of encouragement to our faculty to know that the leadership recognizes what they do. So we're going to go ahead to the next presenter, and I invite Dr. Cord to read the bio of our next presenter.
Dr. Anthony Osu Ansa is an associate professor of education at Albany State. He has graduate degrees in international affairs, educational technology, and a doctoral degree in curriculum and instruction from Ohio University. His research interests are on issues related to struggling readers, reading instruction, improving clinical and field experiences for teacher candidates, and internationalizing the curriculum. He has also taught high school English language and literature in Ghana and Nigeria, and has led 2 ROTC tours for the United States Army Cadet Command as Director of Instruction for Culture and English Language Learning in Togo and Ukraine. He has also written on ways to improve literacy in the developing world. He has recently served as a Fulbright Specialist on the Internationalization of the Curriculum at the Pontificia Universidad in Colombia. We all know our limits, right?
Welcome, Dr. Osu Ansa.
It is Pontificia Universidad Javeriana Cali in Colombia. So, the best part of my Spanish language, anything you do in Colombia, they say con gusto. So I just don't know what con gusto is, but that's it. So, back in 2020, when we were all hunkering down in our rooms because of COVID, I had applied for this Fulbright Specialist program, and thankfully I got it, but they had put a pause on it, so no one could travel per State Department guidelines and so on. So I couldn't travel, so I had to wait 1 full year, and in 2021, I got a call from Colombia, say, okay, Tony, are you ready to come over to help us with this? I said, why not? We've been doing this for so many years, right here. We started this, Dr. Osakwe is here, we started this way back 2015. So we have a lot that we had. So what I wanted to do was to help them figure out what internalization of the curriculum was, so that they can put in place the same structures we've done here in their campus. Javeriana Cali is a small university, but, well, small in the sense that Cali is big, but still it has about 4 different universities up there. And you'll be surprised. Cali, just like Bogota or Medellin, is huge. It's very, very huge. You can travel for about 1 hour and you don't see any tree. Just go through it. It's all city. And every house has what? Has a security camera around it. Every house, every building has that. I stayed in a hotel, 20 rooms, alone, with a guard with a gun, and I had 2 ladies to cook for me, and that's it. Nobody came there. All the 3-4 weeks I was there, no one came there, and they would not allow me to step out until my ride was in. You can't go anywhere. I loved it, but I don't want to be in a prison like that. So this is Colombia, and we're down somewhere here. I don't know how to get that, but Cali is right. Yes, this is Cali right there, and the airport is about an hour away from my hotel. And you will drive through it. You can drive 65 miles per hour, but you won't meet anything. Police, no, nothing like that. So you can drive anywhere you want, but you need to be very careful. You commit any crime, there are cameras everywhere, they'll pick you up. So that's it. So that's me. Thanks to a nice photographer on campus. Where's Christy? This is the picture I gave to them. And then when I went in, they said, okay, Dr. Tony, how old are you? Oh, shut up. So that's me. And then that is Cali, downtown Cali. And it took us about 45 minutes to get to this place. And I took the picture because of the stadium right there. We drove just behind the stadium on our way up to, the coffee farms about 2 hours away. So that was a nice pick that I picked. All right, so this is my first morning in Cali, Colombia. I woke up and was like, okay, this is just like Ghana, like Nigeria, like any other place. Exotic plants all over the place. And then we have the hills. It rains a lot, though. But even in spite of the rains, you see campus on the other side. That's campus right there. They don't have a big place like this where we can sit and eat. Nope, they all eat outside, and it's very good. We enjoyed it. And then this campus, that's the auditorium for the campus. And then we have all the exotic plants you can think about. Yeah. It's more like a botanical garden. Very, very neat. And then again, we have the library on the other side, and then the health sciences building right there. And this is me, the first day I had to present. They put me right there, and I was a big guy everywhere on the TV stations and all that. And then, that is the TV station right there, and then they have the adult education department, and then to the side here they have the social sciences, and behind it they have the math department. Now, this was one thing maybe we have to do around here. No matter who you are on campus, they have to take your temperature first, then you sign in, and if your temperature is too high, the machine will tell you go back home. And then you have to put on the mask, no matter who you are. You have to go back for lunch, come back, you go through the same process again. You want to go to town, mask on. You want to go to the mall, mask on. You get into the mall without a mask, they won't say anything. Somebody will come in, tap on your shoulder, give you a mask, and that's it. Go ahead. But it was neat though. You wash your hands and then you move in. Then I picked a few friends from the international office. This is nighttime, the same place where we take our lunch, and I think that was a very good shot. Now, so what took me there? We had done internationalization here for so many years, so I thought I had a chance to share with the world. So this is what we did over there. I had 12 faculty members who were in the program, and they came from all over the place. Health sciences, and of course we had the dean of the medical school was part of the group. So we had so many people from different places that came in and then took this program so that they can share with their faculty members in a way to internationalize their curriculum on campus. So this is what I gave them, and I cited LISC, and LISC is saying that internationalization of the curriculum is an incorporation of international, intercultural, and global dimensions into the content of the curriculum, as well as learning outcomes, assessment, tests, teaching methods, and support services of a program of study. We have that here, and we need to push it forward so that our kids would know that, yes, we are not in a small island here. We need to think about what's going on in the world. I've traveled to Ukraine. I know the place. Now everything is in ruins. It beats my heart. Right. So we want our students to know that, yes, Albany is not the only place they need to know. They should go outside and learn more about what is happening outside. I've taken 3 students to Ghana, and it was a complete different thing for them. So we are still planning to get some more students to go again because they need to know the world. So this was the big thing for all of us. So why should we even go into it? Internationalizing the curriculum. There's a general goal, there's an academic goal, economic and entrepreneurial goals, and then we have the social goals. We start from that part there. Social goals, yes, we need to enhance students' ability to live in an increasingly multicultural world. This world is not for you alone. So you need to know that Putin, whoever he is doing the wrong thing. Let's condemn him. and then try to make sure that we all live in a world where we believe and expect or respect each other. So that's it. Academic goals, yes. Strengthening liberal education, yes. Helping students to function in the global context, yes. Global interdependence, we know that. And geography and culture changes abound. Again, let me take you back to Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia are like the same mother, different fathers. That's it. Ukrainians speak Russian. Most Russians don't speak Ukrainian. So they know exactly what's going on. The Russians keep talking, they know everything. So that's your problem. All right. So we'll go ahead. Now, this was the big one for me. Global learning outcomes, what was it? When I threw this on the screen, it was like, okay, we know the knowledge, skills, attitudes. Then there was another one, habits of mind, and 4 dimensions. I have not prepared for the habits of mind. When they started reading, the dean of the medical school said, okay, Tony, what is that habits of mind? Okay, I knew it, but I had to figure out what habits of mind is. All those little things that we do in our classroom that we don't even think about. Impulsivity, right? That should be one of those. I think I had a, let's see if I can get that. Oh, no, I can't get that. But the habits of mind, can I pull it up?
Yeah, you can just go right.
To the right here?
Yeah, right.
Oh, no. Okay, that's fine. But there are 4 dimensions that we needed to think about. Dimensions of self and others, dimension 2, interaction, dimension 3, interdependence, and dimension 4, globalization. These are 4 big things for internationalization. And I think I went into each one of them. That's the first one, self-awareness. Who are we? The ability to understand oneself as a cultural being with beliefs, values, assumptions that shape and are shaped by one society and environment, awareness of others, reflecting the ability to recognize others as similar, complex cultural beings. So some people on campus are like, Tony, you're always emotional. Yes, I'm emotional. That was how I was raised up. Don't worry about me. But I can be very nice too, isn't it? Right, so it focuses on critical understanding of identity construction at the individual and cultural level. That's the key thing right there. So let's try to understand ourselves, right? We don't have to think that, yes, this is me, this is how Tony should behave because this is how I behave. No, it doesn't work that way. All right, so we need to cultivate empathy and respect for others, key, and then extending the boundary of human similarity and differences to include the other. That is a big thing our students need to know, not even our students alone, faculty, staff, everyone. Number 2, interaction. Successful interactions require learners to apply the awareness of self and other and expand it to develop more complex, nuanced understanding of human cultures and communication forms. We need that very, very much. So my students in Ghana, it's like, these students are so respectful. I have 45 students in the class and no one is giving me a problem. Yes, you need to understand the other student. You need to understand the other person on the other side of the planet, or the other side of the ocean. So we need our students to learn a lot more about these things. Very, very important. Number 3, interdependence. Reciprocal relationships are very, very important. We need to understand oneself and others. The learner must be able to place the individual within structures that are intertwined, recognizing that changes in one part of the system will result in changes in other parts. Very, very important. And then it goes on to the other bullet right there. Number 4, globalization is key. Right, so we understood that globalization is understood in this model as the expansion and complexity of social relationships and consciousness across time and space, challenging existing political and ethical borders, and boundaries and linking people and phenomena once thought to be unconnected. Right, so that's a big one. Then we went on to other bullets that are very important there, but the fourth dimension was more about the need to understand the sense of globalization. So these were some of the things that we did. Again, the problem we had during this program was we got everything right, but how do we place intercultural competencies in a medical program or something like that, engineering program? That was key. But you'd be surprised. They did so much. They did a whole lot of work on that. It looks like my time is running out. But so let me go straight to it. Okay, so this is me. They took me to the coffee farm and they dressed me up like a Colombian. I picked coffee and then, whew. Okay. That's intercultural competence right there. And then they took me out for lunch. They have rice and see, they take the rice in a small cup and then put it back there. Excuse me, a Ghanaian with a small cup like that? No. No, I don't take rice like that. And then every meal comes with plantain. Whew. Okay, all right, we'll move on. Now, this was the presentation on the 10th of November. Each participant changed his or her syllabus to include the internationalized products. And that was what they did. So that's one, that's two. And they took me to the coffee farm. Whew, I've never seen anything like this. Coffee as far as your eye can see back there. This is Rekuka. Rekuka is close to Medellin, and you turn right, go about 15 miles, and then you should be on the plantation. And this is me and my host. And then, oh, look at that. And then also, on our way back from Rekuka, we branched off to Buga. Buga is 99% Catholic. And this cathedral is such that they don't have masses in this cathedral. If you need a miracle, you go there, pray, and you get a miracle. And where I was standing was like 2 football fields in length. That's where they had their masses. So they were preparing for the Sunday Mass. So, gracias. Gracias.
ASU excellence is the standard, and we've seen that. Dr. Tony representing Albany State and carrying the scholarship that we have here, internationalization, to train in another university. And I'm sure not many people are aware of this, but this presentation shows the quality of faculty that we have here. He applied for Fulbright and received the Fulbright fellowship to go and do the training. We have a number of Fulbright fellows here on campus too, and those are some of the things we have to bring to the presence of faculty to know that they can actually apply for Fulbright, and you can go for a short term and a longer term and so on and so forth, and we'll have a presentation on this later on. But thank you so much. That is a very rich, precise, concise presentation giving us an overview of your experience in Columbia. Thank you so much. And we go to the next presenter, and Dr. Kuck is going to read the bio.
Thank you. Dr. Ivan Page is an associate professor of social work at Albany State. He teaches courses in family development, social policy theory, community organization, and legal issues in social work. Dr. Page is the author of Dads Matter, Me and the Girls, Challenges, Trials, Tribulations, and Triumphs of Raising Daughters. Poetry, an expression of deeper soul and essential writings across time. We need the book.
Yeah, we need it.
Good afternoon. Every semester in the fall, I teach a course called Social Justice, in addition to policy. And so one class we were talking about social justice, primarily on the George Floyd situation, and other acts of injustice. And so we talked about what is justice, what is injustice. And so one of the students we started discussing, like, well, we know out of social justice, the issue is really aggression. And so we know aggression as these direct actions, intended situations that goes on every day. So we know about hostile or violent or attitudes towards another, readiness to act or confront the action or act with provocation. But we start talking about, what about things that are not so common, that you don't see every day? Such thing as microaggression, or small, slight innuendos of actions that's taking place, but it's harmful. Example, Dr. Ochie, you look good. I see your sneakers. You're wearing your gym shoes that you work in every day. I said, normally you come to work very professional. I'm taking a shot at him for wearing sneakers to work when he normally wears professional shoes. It's slight, but it's meaningful. Like, well, it's from me wearing sneakers. There's a problem with sneakers. So a little small act there. So what I'm going to talk to you about in terms of identifying microaggression, how to recognize it, key distinct from microaggression, examples of common occurrences, and how we begin the healing process. I want to introduce it to you, then talk about the healing process. It is subtle behavior that's meant to go unnoticed. Exactly what I said about Ochie. It's meant to go unnoticed, but I'm taking a shot at him for wearing sneakers that he work out in to work and not being professional. A subtle action or incident regarded as instance of indirect, subtle, or unintended discrimination against members of marginalized groups. So I'm marginalizing him for what he's wearing. Then we go on everyday slight innuendos, put downs, insults, indignities that people of color, women, the LGBT community experience every day. Microaggression occurs in three distinct ways. Micro-insults, micro-assaults, and micro-invalidations. And the definitions here, I'm not going to read this because I got two videos that I would like to get to, but you can see this. So these things are deliberate. They're deliberate, but it's such a subtle way that you really don't think about it, recognize it goes unnoticed. You know, your dress is very nice. It's a nice plus-size dress. But what are you saying about the way I look? Or how big or how small I am? Things like that. And the root of aggression is really racism. And it's this inherent that I'm superior to you. The belief that racists possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially as to distinguish them from inferior and superior one to another. I am innately better than you are. Therefore, I have certain rights and privileges. Okay, so I want to display the racism part here. What fuels racism is two factors: prejudice and discrimination. Prejudice is kind of irrational attitude towards people. Discrimination is a behavior when you affect people's ability to achieve a certain quality of life. So, can I be prejudiced and not discriminate? Yes, because I have no power. So these two fuel racism, which goes into aggression. So I'm making that connection there. So I have a video here that I'd like to play that's going to explain in a little more detail. So hopefully this will work.
You did really well on the skills checkoff today. I was pleasantly surprised.
Since I was a kid, I've always known I've wanted to do this.
Consider a time you've witnessed an interaction that left you feeling uncomfortable because it implied that someone or a group wasn't capable or expected to be successful. This interaction is called a microaggression. Microaggression is a term used to describe remarks or actions that imply negative associations and insults toward an individual or group. These are often directed at members of historically marginalized groups. People are often unaware that the impact of their words and actions can have such harmful consequences. This video is part one of a two-part series designed to empower you to notice and interrupt microaggressions. Every microaggression students and staff experience adds to their load. One unintentional comment may seem insignificant, but these comments and experiences can get very heavy. By creating a better understanding of microaggressions and how to stop them, WTCS faculty, staff, and students will create a more inclusive and safer learning environment for all. So, how can you help address microaggression when you see it happening? When you notice microaggressions occurring, interrupt the situation. You could 1. Ask questions to get at any underlying assumptions.
Thanks. Why did that surprise you?
2. Acknowledge what happened to the person affected.
I heard that comment and it didn't feel right.
3. Be an active bystander and explain to the person saying or behaving in a harmful way why their actions had a negative impact, even if unintentional.
You did really well on the skills checkoff today. I knew you would.
Addressing microaggression is an ongoing process. You can start right where you are today. For additional resources or information on microaggressions, please contact the WTCS Office of Student Success.
I like this video because it tells us that we're all responsible. When we see acts of behavior going on, microaggression, things that are harming people or offensive to people, we all have a responsibility of speaking up and saying something about that. That's why I really like this video and how it stands out. What it's not, let's talk about it. It is not overt racist, the white supremacist, the Klan, it's not that. It is not that. It's not the normal organized terms and action and behavior, the usual display. It is institutionalized in the legal system, the political system of voting, housing, and industry. Those things that go unnoticed, subtle acts and stuff. Here's another video that clearly kind of explains it also that I want to share with Dr. Sue at Columbia University.
Tonight, we bring you another conversation in our series, Race Matters Solutions, during a week when racial tensions on campus have led to protests and high-profile resignations. Special correspondent Charlene Hunter-Gault sat down with Columbia University Teachers College professor Darrell Sue to learn more about the small slights that some say are more insidious than the overt racial tensions that could be seen and observed by all. Here's that conversation.
Professor Sue, thank you for joining us. So tell me just what exactly is microaggression?
Well, microaggressions are varying from being conscious, deliberate on a continuum to being outside one's level of awareness and unintentional. Microaggressions really are reflections of worldviews of inclusion, exclusion, superiority, inferiority, and they come out in ways that are outside the level of conscious awareness of an individual. When I'm asked, where were you born? And I say I was born in Portland, Oregon. And they persist by saying, no, where were you really born? And I'll say, Portland, Oregon? And they'll say, no, what country were you born in? And I'll say, the United States. They get very embarrassed. Now, this is an example that they are intending to make a personal connection. But the hidden communication, the true worldview, is that I am a perpetual alien or foreigner in my country. I am not a true American because true Americans only look the following way. And that's what generates these behaviors that are microaggressions.
But you describe it as unintentional, and yet we've seen at the University of Missouri very blatant examples of racism.
You're right about that. Microaggressions vary from being conscious, deliberate, intentional, from old-fashioned racism and bias statements to the unintended consequences. And our studies do indicate that it's the hidden, unintentional forms of bias that are most damaging to people of color. And that, like at the University of Missouri, where you have people being called racial epithets or behaviors that are going on, it actually is only the tip of the iceberg. The reason why I believe students of color, faculty of color, are reacting in such a major way is that they are experiencing a climate that is hostile, that is full of microaggressions. These hate incidents on campus are triggering off this discontent, pain, and feeling of being silenced.
But there are critics of your studies and the notion even of microaggression, which they say have morphed from 1970 when it was unintentional to now everything that happens, and that people are just being overly sensitive. They say if you coddle these students on campus, how does that prepare them to live in the real world?
You know, the problem is that people believe microaggressions are very similar to the everyday incivility and rudeness that individuals, white Americans, experience in their day-to-day lives. They are quite different. Microaggressions for people of color are constant, continual, and cumulative. They occur to people of color from the moment of birth to when they die. And as a result, any one microaggression in isolation may represent the feather that breaks the camel's back. And people who don't see the lived experience of people of color and the daily onslaught that they experience tend not to believe that it's a major event.
You know, there's another criticism because this has been called, some of the things that people are called, now they say the N-word and
Yes.
other things like that, is hate speech, and that it's protected by the First Amendment. So isn't that okay, given that kind of reasoning?
You know, and I think that people who say that we are preventing individuals from free speech don't realize, ironically, that it is people of color that historically have not been able to express themselves openly or freely without punitive actions being directed at them. And so there has to be this balance, but at the same time an understanding that there are limits to free speech when it harms and hurts people.
Why do you think that students commit microaggressions, or adults for that matter?
You know, that's a good question, and I think it goes to the heart of the matter, that none of us are immune from inheriting the racial biases of our forebears. We have, attitudes and biases that are delivered through microaggressions.
But when some of these microaggressions come out in the form of real hatred, is that solvable?
We can deal with that deliberately, but the subtle forms of microaggressions are hard to prove, hard to quantify in some way, and very difficult for us to take actions against, because people oftentimes don't perceive it as harmful and significant. You know, people oftentimes tell me that white Americans are the enemy. I say, no, white Americans aren't the enemy. White supremacy is. It's the social conditioning of the superiority of one group over another. And many white Americans are equally victimized because they have been socialized into a society that tends to imbue them with these images that they believe in, but it's no fault of their own. If you really reach white Americans, they can become valuable allies. One of the reasons why our research concentrates on the unintentional forms of microaggressions is very much what Maya Angelou said. It's the unintentional bias that does the greatest harm to people of color. And I oftentimes use the example that, you know, when you look at the disparities and inequities we have in education, employment, and healthcare, it is not due to the overt racists or the white supremacists. It is due to the well-intentioned teachers who educate our children, employers who decide who to hire, who to retain, and who to promote. And it is those individuals who are unaware of their hidden biases that are having the major impact on our standard of living.
Well, Professor Su, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
And you can find more about microaggressions, including a video made by Professor Su explaining how they have impacted his life, on the Race Matters section of our website. That's pbs.org/newshour.
For the sake of time, I just want to move on. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, these things hurt people every single day. And these are things that people experience over and over as a part of their life that gives them a feeling of don't belong, a feeling of marginalized. Why am I here? It doesn't matter what I do because I'm part of that condemned population. So let me give you some examples. You're pretty to be a plus-size girl. You're pretty to be so dark. A black man noticed that a white woman flinches and clutches her purse as she enters the elevator. You're so lucky to be black, so easy to get into college. You can't be a woman if you can't produce. A store owner following a customer around in the store, a white person waits to ride the next elevator. When a person of color is on it, he or she is driving so slow, they must be an old person. She must have slept with the boss in order to get a position or a raise. And this is a colleague from here shared this, Pam Brown. We were discussing this, and she said, "Did you ever think about foster parenting and how that played into microaggression?" She gave me, and so I came up with this example. You don't have a real mother, father. You are a foster child or adopted. There's some general stuff here. Again, how this creates racial anxiety that people have, always being put down. You're not a part of the mainstream of society. Why should we be concerned about this? Well, it's four things. It's privilege. People are better than other people. I believe they are. It creates a system of oppression, which creates severe restrictions on people. It creates this unjust society that we have to fight against every day. And then it takes it to another step where we're looking at systematic racism, the hierarchy. So that's why we should be concerned about it. So my concern is that how do we achieve justice? What do we need to do, all of us, every day? This is some of the things we talk about. What is social justice? I thought about that, and we talked about 3 different standards of social justice. And so I just want to give an idea about what it is, and it breaks down 3 areas. Dignity, and one of the things that we talk about, a lot about in social work, that everyone has dignity and self-worth. So one of the things when you start talking about the foundation of justice and what is injustice, is that you got to say that everyone has dignity and self-worth. Then you talk about common goal of good and the community, how we organize our society and economic and politics, that everyone is inclusive, operate options for the poor people, how the people are going to set aside, how we bring them into the mainstream, the rights and responsibility, human dignity can be protected, and the healthy community can be achieved. All these human rights are protected and responsibilities are met, that we have an obligation to protect human rights for everyone. Some solutions. I don't want to leave without giving some solutions. How over time? Pretty good? Okay. Every one of us needs to do a self-examination. I mean, we all have some prejudice. How do we overcome our prejudice? One of the things I do in class is to have my students do a bias paper. And I ask them to identify your prejudice, one prejudice, where it came from, and can you overcome it and help people that need help, regardless of your prejudice. So have them do this some kind of reflection on people that. We all have to do that. We have to examine ourselves. Next, recognize and accept that racial, class, and gender inequality exist. So often you hear people, well, everything's better. You're not doing this like this. You can go to college, you can do this, you can go stay in a hotel, but there's still other things that's going on. Understand and respect people's difference. We're different. We have to understand that. I think my colleague, she talked about that, the differences when she did her presentation, looking at aggression. Don't let your friends or family members get away with basic comments or behavior. Speak up against it. When your parents say something that's wrong. Speak out against injustice in your community. Commit to joining an organization fighting against social injustice. Commit to attend 2 cultural events outside of your racial identity each year. Again, piggybacking on my class, what I have my students do is I tell them to go to some kind of event in their community that's different than their race. If you're African American, go to a Jewish festival and experience that and write about that. How did you feel being a part of the festival? Did you feel like you fit in? If you're Baptist, go to a Catholic church. How did you feel about that? So I want them to experience being uncomfortable. Because that's how some people feel when you discriminate them against them. You make them feel uncomfortable. So that's one of the things I do. So these are just some of the things that we can do about it. But again, I think that we all have a responsibility to make a difference. And we always think of the noticeable acts. but there are small, subtle acts that go on every day that affects a person's self-awareness, who they are, what they feel about themselves. And those are the things, I think, as Dr. Sue said, that's more powerful because they go unnoticed, they hit you every day. You know when somebody says something wrong to you outright, but the subtleness of stuff really affects you. And that's what I want to share. Thank you all.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Page. That is so wonderful, and it strikes to the key problems that we have in our society, and we have also students that are experiencing this. So it's very important that we have put this on the table, that everybody embraces this and think about it. Even as we welcome our students in classes, we see a lot of them that are going through this. So this impacts practically all disciplines. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And okay, we have the next presenters.
Yes. So Dr. Osakwe is a professor of English and the Provost Special Assistant for Internationalization and Global Engagement. She has been teaching in higher education for over 30 years. She was the Director of International Education for 10 years and is presently over internationalization of courses and international partnerships at ASU. Dr. Osakwe is a graduate faculty member, and her scholarly interests include composition, communication skills, multimodal pedagogies, international education, curriculum studies, course internationalization, and related interdisciplinary studies. She has presented numerous papers in various national and international conferences and has authored several articles, book chapters, and is the co-editor of some books. She is the guest editor of the special issue edition on Internationalizing the Curriculum, International Research and Review, and it featured 8 articles by ASU faculty who engaged in course internationalization. She's the founder and chief editor of ASU Global Issues. Dr. Osakwe is named a USG Leadership Fellow and received a leadership award from the African Diaspora Development Institute. She's also joined by Dr. Andrea Dozier. Dr. Dozier has been providing instruction in higher education for over 20 years. She is currently employed as the Director of Associate Science in Nursing and an Associate Professor of Nursing. Dr. Dozier is certified in online teaching and legal nurse consulting. She serves as ASN Hybrid Nursing Program Professor, graduate faculty member, and a mentor. She is also ASU Faculty Internationalization Fellow. Her research interests include nursing faculty, teacher efficacy, instructional methodologies, and course design in nursing education.
Thank you so much. I think this topic that we have very much fits right into what Dr. Osu Ansa just talked about. And this presentation we are sharing is a presentation that Dr. Dozier and I did with the last year with the Association of American Colleges and Universities, their annual meeting in January of 2021. So if you recall, the purpose of this engagement, the colloquium, is for us to reshare some of the things we presented outside of the school, and then to encourage new faculty members and those who have not presented to have this as their trial session before they go out to present. So Dr. Dozier is here with me, and the title here that we have is something that we are already practicing at ASU, step-by-step engagement on internationalization. So I'm going to share the theoretical framework, and then Dr. Dozier will use her course internationalization to share an example of what happens in the nursing profession. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to look at 5 components, but we're not going to take that into great details. We're going to look at curriculum and course internationalization, discussing the rationale for curriculum internationalization, which Dr. Osu Ansa briefly talked about, and identify strategic steps for internationalizing a course, review discernible trends and models of course internationalization, and there share some illustration with Dr. Dozier. So very quickly, we're going to take a poll, and just by you raising up your hand, how many of you here are aware, or maybe aware and knowledgeable about course internationalization? Okay, we'll take a poll. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. How many of you are aware about internationalization, curriculum internationalization, course internationalization? Okay, can you raise your hand one more time? Okay, so I'll say 3/4 here are aware of what it is. So it shows that ASU is doing well, because the faculty is the core and center of internationalization. And we've learned a little bit from Dr. Tony's presentation why it is necessary that we understand what internationalization is all about. What is the catalyst for internationalization? Globalization. Without globalization, we won't be talking about this, because we need to be sensitized about what's going on in the world. And we've seen the need for us to incorporate internationalization in our classes. Because some of our students come locally, they've never seen the world, they don't know ever about the world, and we are preparing them to have careers in the world. So they need to know the implications of globalization, and the only way is that we're not going to keep creating courses that we teach that. We have to embody that in the courses that we teach. And that is the key thing that he talked about. So how do we define internationalization? Very simply put, there are various definitions, and institutions adopt definitions that suit their own environment. So we have the global level, which is what is happening around the world and the responses that different continents, different countries are responding to it. Internationalization in Europe was even front and center before even the US kicked in 1965, when Lyndon Johnson said, no more, we have to embody the world in our curriculum. So it's been going on, they cashed in on it for marketization purposes, for growing their economy, because they are recruiting students from Asia, and so they need to beef up their education curriculum to align with the students that they're taking in. So we have the global national definitions of it. We have institutional level, which we have adapted at ASU, and I don't know if you are aware that in 2018, our president also signed ASU up into a cohort with American Council on Education Internationalization Lab. And that is to bring the faculty, the campus community, to be aware of what internationalization and globalization is all about. And we engaged in this project from 2018 to 2021 last year, when they came on campus review and gave us a high score when it comes to internationalization. So at institutional level, we adapted the ACE definition of internationalization, which places the administration at the center of everything, moving down to also all the levels that we recognize. So we recognize that in developing a model of internationalization that we've been using for our faculty professional development. But then we have the cost level. The cost level is the one that the faculty himself or herself adapts to align with the course content that directly impacts the student. And then, of course, we have the individual level, because depending on the faculty, the variant of the internationalization will also be determined by who is the person internationalizing. How much internationalization has that person himself undergone? So these are the various levels. But the key factor is globalization. And that is the key the key thing. Now, why are we engaging in globalization and internationalization? Like I mentioned earlier, it is a continental, worldwide thing. We have over 7-point-something billion population of people on the earth. Okay? We have the Asians having the highest population of about 3-point-something billion, going to 4. And then we have Europe under 1 billion, and we have the US under that. So population has implication, and being that we are dealing with a lot of people, we need to understand how to interact. And Dr. Tony mentioned that interaction among nations, interaction within countries, interaction, even local interactions. We have the global within us. We have the global right here. If you go into town, you go to where the gentleman that sells suits, he was a member of ASU. He was a student, international student, but he settled in here and is bringing the world right in here. So those are some of the dynamics that we want our students to understand, and the implication of the kind of people that we have around. So our students will need to explore the various countries, institutions of higher education's response to internationalization. Employers and students confirm the need for international and intercultural skills for academic and career success. So we keep talking about student success. Now, what is the implication of success, globalization on success? If our students graduate and they don't understand how to interact with people outside, how to accommodate, and how to be in the midst of others, have we really educated them properly? So, it is key. The 21st century graduates is a multicultural environment, and we have to prepare students that are ready for this. So we have internationalization strategic steps. Now, these are the key steps we often introduce faculty to in our professional development. These might not move sequentially the way we have it, but at least we are saying before you can go to internationalize somebody else, you have to begin with the self-reflection. How open are you as a faculty to your fellow faculty members, to staff, to your students, and being aware of the cultural variance of people that we have on campus? How tolerant are you? So, Sanderson, in his article in 2008, talked about the internationalization of the academic self. So you cannot give what you don't have. And we're saying there are a lot of ways to internationalize yourself. Even if you're not able to travel, is it possible to also educate yourself to understand the culture that you have around through reading? Right now, you can do a lot of virtual tours to different countries. You can also interact with your colleagues that are not around. So there are a lot of things that we can do to internationalize the academic self, preparing ourselves to engage in this process and to move ahead to also help our own students. Review the international and intercultural dimensions of your course. At times, what we do is become victims of publishers. So once you recommend a book, you follow the book page by page. Is that a mark of good scholarship? If you open a book and just follow a page, it's easy, and they'll tell you, take this template, give it to your students, just supervise and read. Is that a mark of good scholarship? Or could you do more than just the textbook? Could you review it and see what dimensions you need your students in your student outcomes that are not there, and get other external material, embed in the course, and improve the quality of the course? And that is what we are recommending. You need to explore other dimensions of your course, and then make sure, get in touch with your colleagues in Columbia, Asia, somewhere else. Type them in to present to your students in class. That is bringing in that issue. So we have lots of strategies on that. Review additional resources, identify global learning outcomes that we saw. You have to identify it, and it has to give you the focus that you need to know what you're expecting from your students. Identify the measure of measurable internationalization outcomes that you need. Developing global learning content. You have to do it intentionally. You have to be intentional. Material activity projects that are learner-centered that will inspire the students to learn. Developing global learning assessment. So your assessment evaluation has to align with activities, has to align with the measurable outcomes, has to align with the objectives and the material you're giving the students. So you have to think about it ahead of time and plan everything to align. So we have discernible trends. So internationalization, the national recommended way that has been implemented over the years has been study abroad. But we know that our students, the minorities institutions, Black students have minimal access to study abroad. We have implemented study abroad program. We have created programs to about 14 countries, but within 10 years, we have less than 1% of our students engaging in study abroad. So, minority-serving institutions and even white institutions, nationally, we have less than 10%, within 10% of students who study abroad. So that shows that we need to do something else.
Nice your time.
Okay. So we have all of this that you can integrate into courses. So we have all kinds of models. So let's go ahead and see a very quick illustration. A very quick illustration of what Dr. Dozier did in nursing program. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so I chose the ENURS 3630 Conceptual Basis of Professional Nursing Program. That is the first course in our RN to BSN program. This is an online program. Our program, this particular program is 100% online. So I chose the online course so that we could make sure that our online students had exposure, as Dr. Osakwe has been said earlier. This is the 8-week course. It's offered every 8 and B term. In the fall, we had 69 students, which was a really good number. One of the things that I did first was I internationalized myself. I had never been out of the country. So I was like, well, I got to learn something. So I went on a study abroad trip right before COVID started. Learned a whole lot of stuff, so it was a really great experience for me. I decided that I would go ahead with the course Internationalization. I communicated my choices to my chair and my dean and Dr. Osakwe and read a lot of information on internationalization. I reviewed global learning outcomes, and I identified specific course objectives and created activities and assignments. Now, for healthcare, you were mentioning, Dr. Tony, about how do you incorporate culturally relevant things into your curriculum in healthcare. Our accrediting agencies require us to infuse culturally relevant assignments into our curriculum anyway. And that was an area where we had been lacking. So the objectives that I chose to highlight were already chosen because they were on our syllabus. So I didn't have to create any new objectives. I did this 8-week course. 4 out of the 8 weeks, they had a culturally relevant assignment. And here they are. The first one was a globalized writing assignment, where it asked them, did they feel like nursing should be is considered a globalized profession? Considering culture. This one was, how do you take care of a patient when you don't speak their language? Because nurses do have to do that. And the students in this course were already practicing nurses, okay? So, you know, you have different ways to become a nurse, and this was these were two-year nurses who were working to their 4-year degree, so they were already working in the hospitals and the doctor's offices. And then cultural stereotypes. This would require them to review media and how the media portrayed different cultures and how it affected them. And then the last one was understanding your own cultural beliefs, and they did a social-cultural self-assessment. Here, at the end of the course, I asked them, you know, which one they enjoyed the most, and they enjoyed the socio-cultural self-assessment. We did have some discussion questions that were really good as well. I suppose that, you know, like I mentioned before, assessing yourself really brings to your attention what areas you need to work on. Here's some sample feedback. The feedback was what I was looking for. I wanted these people who are already nurses, I wanted them to have a better understanding of what it was to be more culturally competent, because that's one of a big thing in nursing, you want to be culturally competent. And so they said they thought it was very interesting. The course helped them to understand the importance and how to care for those with different cultural backgrounds. And that's okay, so Dr. Osakwe told me to ask y'all, how many of y'all think that you may be interested in internationalizing your course? If you're not, these are the steps, and we can meet with you and go step by step over it if you would like to.